my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kathleen Carley, Professor of Computer Science in the Software and Social Systems Department in the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University, IEEE Fellow and Director of the Center for Computational Analysis of Social and Organizational Systems, and Director of the Center for Information Democracy and Social-Cybersecurity, both at Carnegie Mellon University. Dr. Carley is a pioneer figure in computational social science, integrating cognitive science, sociology, and organizational theory in computer science to tackle challenges such as disinformation, counterterrorism, and organizational resilience. Her contributions have been recognized with major awards, including the Alan Newell Award for Research Excellence, the Simel Award from INSA, and Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Sociology Association. On a personal note, Dr. Carley was one of my former professors when I studied at Carnegie Mellon University on experience curve and organizational learning. Her work, past work, and current work has continued to inspire me even 20 years after I left Carnegie Mellon. I'm an engineer trying to bring human behavior into engineering models. So if you are one of the outliers, you know you have a friend. So please give me a big hand and warmly welcome Dr. Carley.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. So, I guess this is going to work. Aha, it does work. Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Sonia, and thank you, Peter, for having me and for inviting me here to Sweden. It's a great country. I love coming to Sweden. So I'm going to talk to you about influence and some of the work you're seeing here. This is all done by myself and all my students. And the thing I want to stress at the beginning of this is that in order to study influence today, you really need to combine, all the techniques in AI, natural language processing, and network science. And partly this was recognized by the national academies in the US. They did a decadal survey of the social sciences, like all the social sciences and what will happen in 10 years, in 3 months kind of study. And one of the things they decided was that for the world, this area of social cybersecurity, which is how do we understand and make sense of behavior online and keep the world safe online for people to work, play, etc., the science and the engineering of it was one of the big challenges and new scientific areas that we needed to work on, in the forthcoming decades, in the forthcoming century. And of course, that has progressed. Now, in Europe, a lot of times you call social cybersecurity cognitive security, but it has a social component. So when we talk about influence, it comes under this area, which is recognized as a transdisciplinary field, and that has at its basis methodologically a combination of network science plus AI plus natural language processing. Okay. Influence, to study influence, of course, we use the big three. But when we start studying influence online, you immediately find yourself, like you say, I'm going to go study hate speech today, or I'm going to study disinformation or extremism or fraud. No matter which of those you start studying, you get sucked into the other ones because they're very intricately related. And they're intricately related because they all rely on influence, and they're also intricately related because underlying a lot of those different things are, of course, links to conspiracy theories, and sometimes the same ones. As we look at this, understanding what's going on, it's because all of the digital world is organized into these little topic-oriented communities. I don't care if you're on X or Facebook or pick your favorite, system, Weibo, etc. It's organized into topic-oriented communities with sets of people who more or less want to talk to each other about more or less the same thing, and those groups come and go and change and so on. They are very ephemeral, some of them, and some of them are very long-lasting. but it's organized in that way. And you can affect those groups by two things: by changing both the narrative, what they're talking about, and secondly, by literally changing who is talking to whom. And the most effective influence campaigns do both. And in fact, as an aside, the most effective way to change an organization is to literally change who is working with whom and who is talking, who knows what within the organization at the same time. It's getting those two parts of your brain at the same time that has a big impact. Now, when we do this, and the way we've studied it, is we came up with this, basically a theory of activity online using what's called the Bend framework. And the Bend framework is trying to understand and make sense of the world in terms of who is doing what to whom, with what impact. And whether we're talking about the actions being taken by bots or by people, whether we're talking about whether this is having community effects or effects on the individual, whether we're looking at things like changes in polarization, we're always doing it in this way. The point I want to make here is that every part of this framework is social science theory based and operationalized through a combination of network science plus AI. And relies on, of course, things like affect control, identity theory, and so on. Now, when we do this, and we look at the individuals here, the individual actors online are many and varied, right? It's not just you online. It's not just companies online. It's also these little things called bots, which are pure algorithms, or cyborgs, which are sometimes people, sometimes bots, or trolls, which are people hiding under their names and operating through hate speech, and so on. There's lots of different actors. The point is that finding those actors, different kinds of actors, are best found, optimally found, using different technologies. While bots, cyborgs, and trolls are best found using AI techniques, things like government agencies and news agencies are best found by just having a list of who they are. You're much more accurate than the AI will ever be. And of course, finding other kinds of actors are network actors. People who have high degree centrality, the super spreaders of the world, the super friends, etc. And you find those by network techniques. Once you found all the actors, they go into these maneuvers. Now, this is going to be like, oh God, I can't read that, right? Fine. This is, if you want to copy the slide, you'll have the definitions. The actual maneuvers here, we have 16 of these maneuvers. Of these, 8 of them are designed to affect the narrative, and 8 of them are things that people do to affect the community, who is talking to whom, who is important in that conversation, and so on. Of these maneuvers, every single one of them has now been operationalized and validated using network science plus AI techniques and can be applied to different media. They operate at both the platform, they operate at many levels, and every single one of these has a different probability, if you will, of people, like, let's say I trained you how to do it, being able to detect them. You're going to be very good at recognizing a message that says it's trying to cause excitement to you or make you upset. You're going to be pretty good at understanding if a message is going to be promoting a particular person or trying to demote them, okay? So that's, and so negate them. But the rest of them, you're going to do probably only around 60%. And AI techniques are just as bad. They only get around 65%. But using a combination of AI plus network science techniques, you actually do really good. And one of the reasons, and so what we know about these different things is that these maneuvers will occur on platform level or at the message level. We know that they can be used in groups together. We know that once they occur, there'll be effects that will be seen in 1 to 2 days. Okay, and then you'll get this fading effect. We know that people are usually very bad at finding them and so on. But the reason the computers are good at it, the reason you can do this with AI plus network science, is you take into account a lot of different factors. There's hundreds and hundreds of different factors you take into account that are based on all different areas of the social sciences. For example, out of psychology or cognitive brain science, we have all these subliminal cues, such as the use of capitalization or color will affect the reader of the message. The appeal to specific emotions, the use of emotion language, has another effect. The use of moral value language, calls to sanctity or loyalty. The way the message is framed, if it's like talking about politics or health. And of course, the identity factors, like how does the sender of the message portray themselves? Are they portraying themselves as a family member or as a politician? And what kind of identities are they talking about? Are they talking about, people of a certain gender? Are they talking about people of a certain race? Are they talking about people with a certain socioeconomic background? All of those things go into understanding which of those maneuvers is going on. So it's a lot of factors, and just like chess, computers can do it a little bit better than people because they can think more steps. When we actually look at these are ones that you would be easy for you to tell are excite and dismay ones, right? The one on the left is called the Viking Warrior Campaign. It was a multimedia campaign that NATO did, caused a lot of excitement. It was like, hey, Viking warriors and NATO, join it and see all the cute guys, okay? A lot of success. On the right, though, is another one that Russia did that cost almost nothing to do. It's a double meme showing the defense ministers of Sweden, Norway, Germany, and the Netherlands, right? And which are all women. And then at that point in time, and then the defense minister of Russia. And this is basically showing, why on earth do you think NATO can succeed? Their military people are women, for crying out loud, who are smiling. They don't understand war. It's serious business. And that had a huge impact. So these are the kinds of things, but you would have gotten that those were excite or dismay. And if we move on to things like this, like enhance and distort, they're harder for you to kind of figure out. They often rely on things like popular culture. They rely on colors. They rely on very subtle things. So for example, the distort one, you've got a questioning face, you've got red letters. It begins with the word so. They're implying, not stating, that the hospitals may be, using the money, getting the money for things that they're not really doing it, and so on. So a lot of it is done through innuendo, which is very, very difficult and is not transferable across culture easily, which is another reason it's hard for these to work. These things can have huge impact, and different maneuvers will have different impact. So for example, build maneuvers are often used to create groups where there were none, and then cause those groups to do things. In the case up here on the left, you have in the Crimea, in the Euromaidan revolution, which is not the current one, okay, in Ukraine, you actually had a bunch of young men who liked to share light porn images of women. They did not know each other. Bots were used to form a group out of those young men and then tell them where to go get guns and engage in the fight. On the right, what you're seeing is a denial of service attack, basically. You can't tell what's really going on in Finland at that point in time. And so Russia is amassing its forces on their poise to invade Finland. NATO's about to run an experiment in the Baltic. You got to get rid of this mess. So these things can have huge real-world consequences, and we can capture that using these maneuvers. Now, bots and so on are used to actually support these maneuvers. The point about bots online is not that there's a lot of them. It's not that they create trouble. It's that they're used strategically to get things done. Two kinds of bots, and we've found over 16 different kinds of bots at this point. Two kinds of bots are particularly interesting. There's the amplifier bot, all state-sponsored media, especially that coming out of Russia and China, have all these bots around them that amplify, reset their message over and over again. And those are amplifiers, right? They just help you with getting your word out. The other ones are broker bots. Broker bots sit between groups, and they can keep the groups apart, or they can communicate information from one group to another, making it look in Group A like it came from the members of Group B were part of Group A. So they can make two groups look like they are agreeing, even when they're not. So that's the broker bots. Again, very, very powerful. Both have been used in every election, by the way, in the last, at least the last 8 years. The amplifier bots can be used for more than just amplification. For example, CT Lau is a real person. CT Lau is a critic of the Chinese Communist Party and of China. Now, CT Lau, reasonable person, all of a sudden, at the beginning of COVID, all of a sudden started saying things that were pro-Chinese Communist Party, that were pro-China, that were anti-US, such as, hey, the SARS-CoV virus came from Fort Detrick and was brought over to China by the military and released. Okay, none of which was true, but it turns out that CT Lao, if you look at the fine print, that CT Lao 3 is not the real CT Lao. That one is a bot. So they actually use this not only to engage, explain, and enhance, but they also used it to discredit, in this case, the real CT Lao. And that bot, by the way, if you go to look for it, it's been taken down. Okay, now these different maneuvers can be used together. And in fact, one of the challenges right now is how do we design a network science plus AI algorithm to find when they're used together and what are the patterns. For example, polarization campaigns. Polarization campaigns often occur where you have an issue that divides people, pro and anti-Duterte, pro and anti-climate change, pro and anti-vaccination. You have a social divide. You boost up both groups using these different cyborgs, bots, trolls, etc. You cause one group to get excited and another group to get dismayed. Then you back the opinion leaders or create and back them on one side and on both sides, and then you engage people. At that point, you have about 2 days when you've got these really hyper-excited groups where you're likely to get some kind of physical action, such as getting them to engage in a protest, as was done in Germany before 2 NATO experiments ago. This kind of thing, of course, is one of the ways in which the online world and the offline world are linked together, is by getting these maneuvers. One of the things we know is that what's going on in this case is that these topic-oriented communities are getting transformed through this boosting and exciting and backing procedure into their pathological form, which is an echo chamber. And in the echo chamber is when emotions can flare up really, really rapidly and bad things can happen. The way that's done from a network science perspective is that you have, on the left is what you have the group. The red ones are where people are more or less connected to each other. They get extremely connected together. That's on the right. The ideas that they're talking about are more or less connected. That's the blue on the left. Then they get extremely focused around ideas. That's the blue on the right. And then, of course, the people who are highly connected are now connected to this central idea. So they've kind of gone through a density collapse on 2 dimensions. And that density collapse is one of the signals that a group has become an echo chamber. Now, a lot of the stuff that goes on online is, of course, tied to emotions, right? Emotions are an extremely powerful way to get out messages. And the initial start was people would look at this by doing sentiment analysis. Like every tool out there now has a sentiment analysis. Uniformly, people say sentiment tools are horrid. And that's because the traditional sentiment tools looked at the entire document and said, oh, it's a happy document, because it counted the number of words that were happy. That's really, really bad because you don't know what they're happy about. So now people use localized sentiment. We also use stance detectors, and the difference here is like, oh, this is a pro-climate change message. That's a stance. This is a message that has a lot of happy words in it. That's emotions or sentiment. And so both are cases where natural language processing is used, but both of those are necessary for understanding and getting at things like I had just shown you. When you have all these kinds of things and these bots and so on, they can do other kinds of things besides just affect messaging and narrative. They can have actual physical, real consequences, some of which are economical. Here's an example where we have this one bot. It's the fear of being known bot up there in red. The fear of being known bot is taking messages by the CMOM, and particularly the emotion-laden messages, repeating them. So of course they have high emotional content. Now people are paying more attention to it, and it's getting recommended more. Once it gets a bunch of followers, it then tells people to go to this one website, which is where they're collecting donations for the children of Syria, which is thought to be a money laundering site for ISIS. So it actually used emotional messaging by capturing from imam to actually lead people into brokering money. And a similar kind of thing is done in some fraud campaigns. hate speech and other things like this. One of the messages I want to get across is that if you just use AI alone, from a computer science perspective, yeah, it looks great. You got just a couple more percent accuracy. Forget it. That is not the way to solve these problems. You want to start with real social science theory. What we've done here with hate speech is we went and said, what do we know that hate is? Hate is expressed by talking about identities and then bashing it with hate speech. So it's hate speech plus identities have to both be in there for it something to be hate speech. Both of those can be identified in a variety of natural language processing ways. Taking that information, plus taking the network position of the sender, combining that information and then giving it to your machine learning algorithm, you can actually generate a hate speech detector that, compared with a straight machine learning one, is wicked fast, meaning it operates in seconds as opposed to hours, that is cross-cultural and can work across 40 or more languages, as opposed to most machine learning ones that work only in a single language. Using this and looking at hate speech, looking at messages during COVID, we see that in fact all the red dots are hate speech. There's a little bit of hate being expressed early on, a lot of it against cruise ships, okay, and a lot of it against politicians. And then what bots were used for was not promoting hate, but by introducing the haters to each other and forming, therefore, these little hate communities, and then for convincing the members of those hate communities to change the object of their hate. So instead of hating politics, don't hate the politicians, don't hate, the cruise ships, hate scientists. And that's actually led to the new hate scientist movement that we saw moving throughout the world. Of course, these same techniques can be used in other areas like disinformation. And using them, we found out, the amount of information we know about disinformation today is just huge compared to what we knew 5 years ago. And among those are various new findings, things like, you can actually counter disinformation by making fun of it, by using satire. You can, if a celebrity tries to counter disinformation, it's going to spread the disinformation more, even if that's not their intent, just because everyone wants to say something that the celebrity said. The bots are used strategically to promote it, and so on. But again, all of this comes from understanding at a social science level what disinformation is. Okay, how can we put these things together and let it play out? Okay, you may remember a few years ago, there was this gentleman in France, a school teacher, Samuel Paty, who was beheaded. Okay, after that, Erdogan called for boycotting France and for boycotting Macron. People were worried at this point in time that the call for jihad that was appearing across the Middle East was going to lead to this new uprising in the Middle East, spread into France, a bunch of people would get killed, from there spread throughout Europe, and from there spread out to places like Singapore. The question was, is this going to happen? And if so, can we prevent it? If you actually look at the call for jihad at that time, I've got it focused down here on the left on the call for jihad, you'll find that a lot of the people calling for jihad were not people, they were bots. All those big gray dots are bots. Of those bots and so on, what were they doing? They were saying that Erdogan was great and backing Erdogan, and they were trying to negate or put down Macron and say what an idiot he was, okay? If you look across the different countries, and here we had to use AI-type techniques to figure out which country the different posts were coming from, you find it in France, the discussion is completely organic, it's all people. This was a genuine, serious debate going on in France at the time. Outside of France, it was all just bots. There was no uprising going on in the Middle East. And once we were able to do this, troops could stand down, war is averted, the world was safer. So big consequences. Okay, online to offline activity again happens. Consequently, this is one of the first indicators proving the link between them. This is looking at face masks and so on. And the point here is, someone says something in the real world, and if something happens in the real world, an event occurs, you get an increase in chatter online. the increase in chatter online makes it okay culturally to engage in certain kind of activities. Okay, the point here is if you have some event occur offline, chatter goes up, way up, can become then culturally, you hear people talking about it, it can become culturally acceptable to engage in something, right? So increase in hate speech online means that someone will engage in a hate activity offline. Okay, you can guarantee it will be, you can't just predict who it is. Here what we see is this is the governor mandates you will wear masks. Okay, that will affect then the amount of mask wearing and will affect the amount of infectivity and will affect the number of people who then die. But online, that leads to more people talking about wearing masks. And if you have a bunch of bots there who are saying, oh, ignore the governor, he's an idiot, okay, which happened in most democratic states. In the US, in fact, you have an increased chatter against it. You get this backlash effect, and mask wearing will then go down as a secondary effect. So first it goes up because the governor said, then it goes down because online people are telling you that it doesn't really matter. Okay, and so that's one of the ways in which the online to offline world interact. Okay, but there's other ways. It's not all just about what's chattering. It's also the fact that when you get new information, you may be a curious person and you want to go and get more information. And one of the ways is if someone's talking about something, you go, what on earth are they talking about? Oh, hey, I'm going to go to my favorite browser. Google what's going on. You know, you type in something and you go and look for it online. In this case, there's something that's called a data void. It means there's just not information out there. So if there's a data void and I want to spread new kinds of information to fill that data void, I'm going to, create web pages that have the information I want you to see. I'm going to put out dredge words. I'm going to use them in these online posts. You're going to read these things, say, oh, that's a weird word. I've never heard of it. Indigo children. What on earth are indigo children? So you go and type it in. This takes you to one of these websites and so on. And then all of a sudden you learn about indigo children. And all of this happens really, really fast, okay? But the preset for it can take months. And this is done through a combination of bots, things like pink slime sites, and dredge words. Dredge words, again, are these words that are made up. They're sometimes just like a couple of words banged together sometime, but they will lead you into, when you press on them, these data sites that are filled with conspiracy theories, not real stories, disinformation, or whatever the people who set it up want you to find, okay? It doesn't have to be the disinformation. Pink slime sites are sites that purport to read news, but they're not really. They have no reporters, and they're often owned by a few conglomerates. And then, of course, bots we've talked about. These three things are, again, used together to help online to promote kind of activity linking the online world to the offline world. And in particular, you might start off by saying, okay, there's some kind of condition that we have some kind of social divide where we're concerned about it. Haves and have-nots. There's some kind of a data void associated with it. We set up we generate a large number of bots ahead of time. So they're set up like in, say, January. We then set up a website that has the information we want people to get to. Okay, maybe that's all done by the end of February. We then release some stories with these dredge words in them, okay, in, say, March. People then go and go and type those in. They go to these websites. The bots become active, and they start talking about it. Then the real news story comes out, but by then the damage has been done. Okay, online to offline. So again, these things are used together, and one of the big activities now is how do we combine AI and network science so we can better find these and other things like these to actually create this kind of activity. Going on, of course, the big new kid on the block is generative AI. And one of the things that is of concern is how do we combine this with network science? Both network science and generative AI have failings. Network science is great at many, many things, but we are still really lousy at telling whether there's a positive or negative tie between things. We're still really not that great with dynamics and other things. Generative AI is cool, it's fun, but it makes mistakes just like humans do, and it can't count, and it does not generate good network data. So can we combine these to get even better at both of them? And doing that may actually be a win for the computational social sciences. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions? Again, raise your hand and a mic will go to you. There.
Wonderful talk. I've got lots of questions, but I'll try and limit it to just one. So when you talked about identity and hate speech, so you were looking at identifying people's identity and linking that to hate speech, and you could find those networks. What were you seeing in identity? Is it what you expected to see? Was it kind of dog whistle identity words, or was it something more?
So
you didn't expect.
like what kind of things were identities?
Yes.
Yeah.
How were identities defined?
Yeah. It was not a small set of identities. In fact, different hate speech will use different, but they were identity terms that usually refer to groups of people. So sometimes they were family-based, like, you know, mother, father, whatever. Sometimes they were gender-based, women, men, etc. Sometimes they were using slang words or abusive terms, but not always. And then sometimes they were job-related, so talking about politicians or scientists, and sometimes they were related to racial-based ones. And what you find is that different hate campaigns and hate campaigns in different countries will focus on different kinds of identities. So at the same time, the U.S. might have had a lot of ones that were anti-politicians. You might have seen a lot of ones that were instead of politicians, they were maybe anti-scientists in, say, Thailand. So you'll see different kinds of identities at different times in different countries. Okay?
So I see a hand there, but maybe there's a hand here too. Go ahead. Yes. And then,
Hello. First of all, wonderful talk.
Thanks.
Is this working? My question is more of a curiosity. I noticed you kept grouping trolls, which, as I understand, are normal human beings hiding their identities, with bots and cyberbots. What I'm asking is, from your perspective as an expert, is there a distinction in their ways of operating and in their ways of influence, or it's grouped, they act more or less the same?
I'm sorry, is there a distinction
Trolls,
between what?
trolls,
Yeah.
and bots.
Oh, yeah, there's a
keep
big
gr-
distinction.
You keep because you keep grouping them together as acting more or
Yeah.
less the same way. I was wondering if there's an actual distinction when you're working with them.
So bots, from the way we define it, are purely algorithmic. They're just pieces of code. They can act in a certain way, whereas trolls are humans. And there are humans that typically use hate speech and go into groups and try to cause division and divisive behavior using that. So, for example, in a lot of online medical groups, you'll have trolls go in there and actually tell people, why are you here just whining? Okay?
Yes.
Whereas bots are different.
Like my question is, during your treatment and the processes you apply to detect them, are they functionally that similar, or they are very different?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your
Like
question.
the way the
We
way
use
they.
different algorithms for finding both of them.
Okay, so you use.
You can't find them with the same algorithm because they have different functioning behaviors.
Okay, that was my question.
And behavior matters when you find them. Yeah.
thank you. Question over there, right? Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for the talk. I really like the framework. One question that came up for me when you were talking about the polarization campaigns and the effects of the polarization campaigns is whether you know or whether you've done research on whether this polarization can also be caused exclusively by recommendation algorithms on social media.
So can polarization also be caused by algorithmically?
Well, I guess polarization is not a uniform concept, right? You can have different forms of polarization depending on sort of what you're looking at. And the specific observations that you didn't go so much in depth on the specific observations of the polarization that you made with the campaigns. Whether this type of observations you think could also be made exclusively from the polarization caused by recommendation algorithms without a targeted polarization campaign.
So we didn't actually distinguish different types of polarization when we did that work. So I can't 100% answer your question. Just thinking about the kinds of data we had and so on, the issue around which groups are polarized is irrelevant. We saw the same process for lots of different issues. But for different kinds of polarization, if they're fundamentally focused, like a triadic, it's no longer really truly polarization, but if you had triad groups, it's a slightly different process than what I showed there, because you also have to build hate between the three groups. That's a little bit different. So if there's a fundamentally different type, my guess is that we would need slightly different maneuvers, but we could still use a maneuver-based approach to finding it. Okay.
Yeah, I really appreciated your speech. I wonder if you have any thoughts about the future of democracy.
About what? About democracy?
About what?
About what about
Democracy.
Democracy.
I think democracies are very fragile as institutional forms, and I think that the kinds of things we're doing can help us understand when they are getting undermined and when they're not, and can help us understand when things truly are a matter of speech and differences versus true disinformation. So, for example, true disinformation is relatively rare, but a lot of it is innuendo and opinion, and a lot of democracy depends on opinions.
Do you think
That more we can do more at break.
maybe off the stage, but do you think democracy is also more resilient too?
I don't know. It's not clear whether democracies are resilient or not. And the question also is, does AI help us make it more resilient? That is also very unclear at the moment, because AI works really well when you quit changing the rules, right? So therefore it works really well in autocracies. And
The question over there.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is also a little bit bleak and along the same lines, but in terms of like effective polarization, how can we begin to bridge communities, especially of political discourse, when there is so much selective exposure to mis and disinformation, and also like general mistrust in academia and traditional media institutions?
I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to hear you guys up here.
I think it's a microphone. So wait, can you speak a little bit slower?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Sorry. So in terms of effective polarization, my question is, how can we begin to bridge communities, especially of political discourse, when on certain sides there's a lot of general mistrust and distrust in academia and traditional media institutions?
So it's how could we bridge people so we can not polarize?
Yes, and also along those lines, when there is a lot of mistrust in academia and
Yeah. Okay. So the mistrust in academia it goes in waves. Okay, and we happen to be it's kind of hopefully nearing the top of a wave right now. So one of the ways to increase trust in that academia is to actually do more things in the community, and also to have more people doing translational research. So talking to the public in terms the public can understand, right? So that's very important. So that's the second part of it. So in terms of building bridges to reduce polarization, there's actually been a huge amount of work that's been done in the past couple of years with people developing these new techniques, often AI assisted, to help people engage in discourse and to guide them in that discussion so that they can start hearing the different sides of an argument and seeing it laid out. And then that has actually helped. The trouble is it actually reduces polarization for those few people, but it doesn't scale well. So a lot of the science right now is how do we make those techniques scale?
There's one more here.
I was curious, great talk, by the way, sorry. I was curious if you had thoughts on how some of this information can then help run debunking campaigns. Like, do they function in similar ways? Let's say you have 2 days of like some really bad information going around. Someone now needs to correct it. There are maybe agencies who are interested in maybe debunking that information. Do these work in similar fashion? If not, what happens there, like on the flip side?
So the question is how we can use this to counter things. Okay. Well, countering disinformation is actually very, very difficult. Everyone said, oh, there's a whole group who totally believes in debunking and says that's going to be the way of it. And we'll give people the little lie first, then they won't believe the big lie when it comes because they'll already be immune to it. It turns out that works in the lab. It doesn't work out in the public as much. Some of the things that do work at scale are the use of satire is a good counter maneuver. Education also works, but education is very hard to do again at scale. Another counter that tends to work is the way you give people choices and so on. So one of the things is just putting algorithms in and having the companies like put up flag, oh, this is disinformation, or have the government say, oh, we can't, we're going to prosecute for that. People don't like that, right? Because it doesn't give them a choice. And so making the rules in such a way that gives people choice and making it more obvious actually is a good way to counter disinformation, because then people kind of go in and buy into stuff directly. So. And by the way, I have a student, Catherine, who just finished her entire dissertation on the topic. I can give you the reference afterwards if you catch me. Okay.
So I feel bad that I stopped you right before your most interesting slide, the last one, which is combining network science with generative AI. Can you say maybe like what are the active research areas that you're working on right now, or it's hot topic right
now? So one of the things that we're working on in this area is generating synthetic data. Because one of the problems when you're teaching people with network science is that the data sets you get often are under privacy restrictions, or you're not allowed to share them, or they're too small, or they have other pedagogical problems, and I cannot keep this thing on my ear. But anyway, the point of this work is that we're trying to generate synthetic network data, so like synthetic tweets or synthetic Reddit or synthetic Telegram or Facebook or whatever. And we're actually using generative AI to do this. Now, the thing is, generative AI, it is trivial, absolutely trivial, to generate out a set of posts that look like these came from Twitter or X, or these came from Facebook. And people, you would look at and say, yeah, this is real. This looks just like what I read all the time online. You would be wrong, 100% wrong. Because what's missing is that it doesn't have the right pattern of life behavior in it. It doesn't use emotions right. It doesn't use moral language right. And the network it generates is absolutely pathetic. So one of the things we're working on is what do we need to, what is it special about the way people talk online that generates the networks that we actually observe? They certainly do not look like any of the generative models of network that we get out of physics. And so the question is, how do they look? And so combining network science and AI in that way is very promising, and that's one of the things we're working on.
Thank you. Let's give Professor Carley another big hand. Before you leave, I have one announcement to make. As you know, by tradition, we give out many awards, including the Best Paper Award and the Best Poster Award. And the Best Poster Award is decided by the audience, by all the participants. So make sure there's QR code that you can scan. Make sure you vote for the Best Poster Award each day after the poster sessions. And with that, you deserve a break. Thank you.